welcome. It's another Confessions podcast from your friends at BBC Radio 2. Drive time specifically. It's slightly shorter this week because there was a bank holiday, so there was nothing to confess about. But what we do have is rather fine quality here. We have Don't Cry For Me, Ford Cortina. See, that's class. The Gin Crowd. And Every Friday is a Winding Road. Here it all comes. Dear Father Simon and the warm, fuzzy acolytes, this comes from Andy for tonight's tale. I am mindful, says Andy, that the schools will be soon filled again with the young. Good observation there, Andy. I take great delight in watching the youth of today making their way to or back from school in their new uniforms with brand new bags and briefcases clutched to their apprehensive hands, and inevitably my mind looks back to my own school days, in particular my own first day back at secondary school. This is September 1973, the first day at secondary. I had 3 callers yesterday on All Request Monday who were going to their secondary school this week. It's a big, big day. The tradition, says Andy, then as now I think, was to try to wear a school uniform in ways that were only just within the rules. The plain white school shirt was replaced then by a white pattern fabric Ben Sherman, button-down collars. School ties were worn as short as possible with as big a knot as possible. Anything round the size of a clenched fist became the norm. School trousers, however, weren't generally too far from standard. No black jeans or patch pockets were allowed, so as a rule trousers were mostly plain and boring. During the summer holidays, however, I had seen a pair of trousers which kind of met the rules, but which were different enough to stand out. These trousers had channel seams, look that one up, a high waistband with 3 buttons, I remember those, and cargo pockets. I managed to convince my mum that they would be very warm and practical. Right. And they did meet the uniform standard, and she reluctantly paid the extra couple of quid so I could have them. First day back, I strutted up to the school gate in my new trendy strides, in much the same manner as the then unknown John Travolta later did in Saturday Night Fever. Come the morning break or playtime in 1970s parlance, I went out for a further spot of networking and saw an old, familiar and much disliked face. Let's call him Terry. Terry and I had a long-standing grievance, the kind that could only be resolved by mortal combat. If I'm honest, can't actually remember what the grievance was about, but whatever it was very serious and couldn't be ignored. He looked across the playground at me, smiled and said, "Hello, Andy." This was intolerable. He clearly thought that the problem wasn't serious. I had to put him straight. There was an exchange of words, followed by an angry exchange of words. This then escalated to an exchange of angry threats. Then there was some ineffectual wrestling. Not much, really, but a teacher rushed up and separated us and probably administered the first detentions of the school year and a new record for being the earliest awarded in any year. And that seemed to be it, until he said, "Better go and see the nurse and get that knee looked at." I looked down to see a gash in my knee, some blood, and far worse than that, a massive tear in the knee of my brand new trousers. I was numb, not with pain, I was numb with fear. My mum had paid an extra 2 quid for those trousers, and I'd ruined them in a single morning. At the very least, if I was lucky, I'd be grounded until I was 30. At the end of the day, I attended detention. The hall was empty, but for Terry and me. In the light of my impending doom, whatever we'd fought about all paled into insignificance, so we shook hands and apologised. The hatchet was buried, and the teacher let us out a bit early. Terry was happy to be free, I wasn't. Now I had to go home and face my mother. I walked really slowly. I took the longest route I could, anything to delay the inevitable. Try as I might, I simply could not come up with a plausible excuse for how my strides got ripped on my first day back at school. I was going to get it when I got home. My route took me completely the wrong side of town, and I finally got to the zebra crossing where I needed to cross over to my side. As I stepped onto the crossing and began to cross, a Ford Cortina literally drove right across in front of me, so close it knocked my case from my hand. In that split second, I was struck by a flash of pure genius, and I quickly swung my arm round and smacked the car on the boot lid. At the same moment, I screamed, "Ah!" ah! And I sat down in the road, ripping the plaster from my knee as I did so. There was a screech of tyres. The car stopped a few yards away. The door swung open, and the driver got out. He was huge. He was dressed a bit like Gene Hunt from Life of Mars and looked a bit like Ray Winston on steroids. He reached down, He reached down and pulled me to my feet, and in a voice that was surprisingly like Phil Mitchell from EastEnders, in pure Essex, Simon, he said, "You all right, mate?" Well, my mind was churning. I was literally shaking at the audacity of my plan. Or maybe it was fear at trying to get on with this gorilla. But I decided to stick to the plan, such as it was. I looked up at him and said, "I think so, mate," before looking down and shouting, "But look what you've done to my new trousers," as I pointed to the ripped knee and the slight trickle of blood from where I had early deplastered myself. The driver looked down and saw the tear and the blood. I could see the gears churning in his mind. He'd clearly not stopped on a zebra crossing, and even back in the 70s, that was very, very, very bad. Worse, he'd also injured a pedestrian, very bad too. He realised he was in trouble, and I knew that I had my excuse for the damaged trousers. All was right with the world, and then it got even better. Gene or Ray or Phil, whatever we're calling him, pulled a wad of banknotes from his pocket. A wad that would have choked a Rottweiler. I was well impressed. He peeled off a £20 note, pushed it into my hand and said, "All right, mate, no real harm done, just a scratch. You look like you're a tough kid." Which I didn't really, to be honest. "You can take it and have this for some trousers. We'll call it even."
Trousers.
Trousers is what he's doing. Still ironing. With that, he was away, back in his motor and gone with the screech of tyres. I was a bit dazed at the speed of it all. I looked down at the note in my hand, half expecting it to be Monopoly money or something, but it was a genuine £20 note. I went from dazed to shocked. 20 quid! That's a fortune in the 70s. To a 14-year-old, it was real treasure. Almost a deposit on a new bungalow. I was rich beyond my wildest dreams. As luck would have it, the shop where my mum bought my trousers was less than 50 yards up the road. I made a beeline for it, £20 in hand. I picked up an identical pair for £7, made my way to the fitting room at the back. I switched all the debris from one set of pockets to the other. 14-year-old boys do have a lot of debris. Put them on, made my way to the till, paid for the new strides, asked the lady to bin the old ones, went home, healthy profit, no longer facing a right-hander. Life was indeed good. This is my tale, Father Simon. Maybe I'm a dinosaur in these enlightened, politically correct times. Maybe not. I can only ask that you put my case to the collective and let them decide. I should pack for the heat when I finally make my way into the afterlife. That's what I'm expecting. Anyway, Andy, with an interesting first day of term, he was all dolled up. He was looking fantastic. Got himself into a scrape, but he... A little bit of ingenuity there and a bit of good fortune on the zebra crossing. What are you thinking there, Sister Jules?
Well, I think for a 14-year-old, Andy was pretty canny.
He was.
The ingenuity you just mentioned. Gene didn't get into any trouble. He obviously drove off.
Yes.
I myself was incarcerated in an all-girls boarding school when I was younger, so I never had to face the wrath of my mother in such circumstances. So I'm quite compassionate towards how he was feeling.
Did you actually tailor-make your school uniform, though? Because I think that's what Andy was talking about right at the beginning. Everyone makes their school uniform as cool as possible.
We tried to, yeah. We took skirts up and did things like that, and we wore... Yeah, we did. As much as we could at boarding school.
Did you get away with much?
Not as much as... perhaps we would have done if we'd have not been at boarding school.
Oh, okay. Well, Brother Matthew, what do you make of all that?
Well, obviously, congratulations, Andy, on being knocked over by a stereotype by your man Ray Windsor with his forecourt. Not only that, but he's got this massive wad of notes. Get yourself something nice up west. Lovely. I am going to forgive Andy just because of the John Travolta moment, which we all do when we've got something on that we rather like ourselves in.
Yeah.
And we all walked and we all do the strut and we all hear, you can tell by the way I move my walk, woman's man, no time to talk. So we all do it, Andy, and that is why I'm going to forgive.
Father Simon, the collective, being the parent of two girls, now both in their 20s, over the years I have had to endure a number of amateur dramatics that they have taken part in whilst at school. Being a good mother, I would always buy a ticket at an extortionate price, go along and sit in the audience. What?
You can't complain about the prices at school productions.
I think you can. I think
Really?
she's just done that.
Yes.
How much do I have to pay to come and see? Go along and sit in the audience, slap on an interested face, clap and sing along, congratulate them and their peers after the show on the wonderful performance, regardless of the fluffed lines, the out-of-key singing, costume malfunctions, and the usual over-enthusiastic wannabes. Other children, you understand, not my own. On this particular occasion, the performance in question was a stage production of the critically unacclaimed 2004 Disney film High School Musical. As always, the usual suspects, the sucky-up kids, were given the lead roles. despite the obvious lack of real talent there. But still, I bought 2 extortionate tickets for myself, so you've got to think about the price, and a friend who wishes to remain anonymous, which is bizarre because I don't think that's actually explained through it anyway. The day before, my friend and I were discussing the dreadful waste of an evening that was to come.
This is great. Yeah.
And how we could have gone to our local for a nice glass of Merlot instead. When I hit upon an idea of brightening up the proceedings, how about we take in some gin and tonic disguised in a water bottle to help numb the senses and make the evening go with a bit more of a swing. This is not good behaviour, is it really, for a school production, Bobby?
I don't think you should advise it, no.
Absolutely not. The evening of the show, shortly before setting off for the school, I emptied an unassuming bottle of water, replaced its contents with said gin and tonic. I tightly screwed on the cap and headed out for the night's entertainment. We arrived in good time, but all the front seats of the auditorium were full of eager parents poring over the programme, spotting little Johnny's name in the list of credits. Oh, look, there's him. He's going to be great, you know. It was a full house, as most of the sixth form had shown up and were being very rowdy. We found 2 seats right at the very back and settled down for the performance. The evening's production was introduced by the headmaster. Let's call him Mr. Twittle. Let's.
Yeah.
Almost certainly was his name. Mr. Twittle stood at the front, and his familiar northern brogue, no chance of that, said, I'm not going to do it.
Really?
I don't think so.
You can't add
because,
that to your
well,
bow?
look, Stephen Tompkinson is coming in after 6.
Yeah.
And he has a northern brogue.
Okay.
And I'm not going to put my accent up against his.
That's just the way that's fair enough.
So the headmaster, who now comes from Essex, he says, right then.
Yeah, right.
Let's have a bit of hush for this week's marvellous production of High School Musical, Shut In at the Back. The band screeched into life. The lights dimmed, the curtains failed to open. Much twitching and yanking later, they parted to reveal the opening scene. What followed was 40 minutes of torture. Fortunately, says Ginny, I remembered my illicit refreshment that I had prepared earlier. No, I don't know if it was the heat of the auditorium or the jostling of the bottle in my bag, or the fact that fizzy drinks, such as those containing tonic water, should not be kept in flat-bottom bottles. But as I started to unscrew the cap during a particularly quiet part of the High School Musical, the lid flew off with an almighty bang. It arced into the air, flew across the audience, and landed squarely on the head of the head. Yes, it hit the headmaster on his bald spot. Luckily, due to the acoustics of the room and the fact that the seating area was in semi-darkness, the origin of the bang and the projectile could not be pinpointed back at me. After a short moment of confusion, this is like the Beano, the house lights went up and the headmaster interrupted the performance to demand which pupil was responsible, guessing it was a prank by one of the unruly sixth formers. Who did that? Absolutely nothing. Who thought it would be funny to throw drinks at the headmaster? The answer to which was everybody, but
Yeah.
no one actually said anything. If no one owns up, you know what'll happen. Well, we all did know what would happen. So and therefore, says Ginny, I therefore seek forgiveness from the performers who had their moment of stardom rudely interrupted, and their parents who can no longer claim that it was their child who was the most talked about part of the play, but mostly Father Simon. I seek forgiveness from the sixth formers who ended up in a 3-hour detention the following day because, unsurprisingly, none of them came forward to claim responsibility for the interruption because it wasn't one of them, it was me. I also seek forgiveness from my daughters who knew nothing of their alcoholic mother's role in one of the most memorable school performances of all time. Until now, should you read this out. Well, Ginny, the appropriately named Ginny, consider it done and consider it passed on. Well, you know, she clearly wasn't very enthusiastic about the whole process anyway, but at least she turned up and she paid money, presumably to the school funds, Sister Bobby. So what do you make of that from Ginny? What do you
The
think?
thing is, I am stuck in the middle here because the thing is, the whole point of school performances is the fluff lines and the wardrobe malfunctions are part of it. It's what you look forward to. That's what you go for. And I suppose I forgive you for taking in the gin and tonics, although it's not allowed. I do forgive you for not knowing about the kind of fizz bang wallop thing that happened because that's just hilarious. What I don't forgive actually is the headmaster because he's actually the one that actually made such a big thing. He could have just let it go. And that's who I'm really, really cross about. Having said that, Ginny, I was going to forgive you, but then I realised those poor students got a 3-hour detention. I think you should have actually gone and said, it was my fault. So I think, Ginny, on this, I loved the story until the others had to take the knock for it. So I think you should have spoken up and you should have said it was me.
Who thought it would be funny to throw a
We all
I
do.
did,
drinks
sir.
cap at the head teacher?
So, Ginny, not forgiven, but great story nevertheless.
Brother
Yes,
Matthew.
hello.
Sorry about that.
I find in Ginny a kindred spirit because I think we all do, because we've all had to sit through those school productions, which I'm sure some of them are very good, but most of them not very. I love the fact that she's complaining about the production values, and I've paid a certain amount. I expect it to be any good, and it's not. They're only kids, but I would want to be sat right next to Ginny. Personally, I'm full square behind Bobby on this one. Is that the person I've got a problem with is the head teacher. Number one, a 3-hour detention? Really? For that? It's a bit harsh. And also, get over yourself, Mr. Twiddle, with your bald spot and you're getting hit by the tonic water. The worst things happen at sea. 3 hours? Insane. So I am forgiving.
So here's tonight's confession, which comes from Linda. And Linda, we appreciate your tale very much. I think people are going to like this. My guess is, and I might be entirely wrong, my guess is this is going to be one of those confessions where the people's verdict will consist of, yeah, I do that. I done that. It's the 1990s, says Linda. I was a young, recently qualified teacher and recently married to my husband called Dominic. I was... What? It's not funny?
Because it's not a real name, is it? He's seen Dom. He's probably, I'm just thinking, it could be Derek. Anyway, sorry, I've interrupted. Welcome back, I'm here.
I was working in a lovely upper... Just turn him down a little bit. I was working in a lovely upper school in sleepy Suffolk, and Dom was working in Cambridge. However, came the time Dominic got promoted and he got a brand new job in Manchester, so we had to move house. Now, obviously, we still had friends and family in East Anglia, so we drove back down the dreaded M6 regularly on a Friday night. After a full week of teaching science to reluctant city children, I would be very tired and would not feel like tackling the 4-hour drive, but the lads in Dom's office had a tradition of going straight to the pub after work on a Friday. So I would get home to find my husband definitely over the limit and unable to drive. In fact, he sleeps most of the way. Most of this journey, he is snoring and fast asleep. These were the days before the toll road, so I would sit in traffic around Birmingham, tired and very cross at having to do this journey again, driving it on my own again. Fine, well, you have your whiskey chasers and your pint of heavy and your lime and lager. Eventually, I started to take my revenge. You'll like the description here, Bobby. Where the M6 joins the A14, there is a large roundabout, and I discovered that if I went into the roundabout, this is all legal, obviously, if I went into the roundabout fast enough and at the right angle, I could swing back and make my sleeping husband's head smack against the window, waking him up with a start.
Okay.
So she straight-lined the roundabout now?
Unfortunately, he usually went straight back to sleep. However, the roundabout near Huntingdon was even better, and after weeks of practice, I could really give him a decent bang, which would wake him up permanently.
Right. I must think about that for a minute.
I just noticed that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Moving on.
It's the roundabout near Huntingdon. It's fair.
Different times.
He often commented on the fact that he always woke up at exactly the same point in the journey, but never suspected why. He continued to have Friday night drinks, so I gradually became an expert at taking exactly the right lines into and out of the roundabout to give his head a really satisfying wallop. Jensen Button would have been proud of me. Eventually, we realised that city life was not for us, so we moved back to Suffolk before I killed off all his brain cells. Dominic never knew what I was doing to him on our homeward journeys, and he did always the drive back to Manchester on a Sunday night, so I would like to ask for forgiveness for every blow to his head and every time he woke up in a confused daze and wondered why I was laughing. He no longer works in an office and I am no longer a teacher. In fact, we work together running his company, and here's my boss. Really? So I think it's time to confess, because he doesn't know anything about this. I hope both he and you, the collective, can forgive me. So every single time... You know, Dominic, the reason why you woke up at exactly the same time in exactly the same place, it's a little bit of a bang on the ear, to quote the Waterboys. That is exactly what's going on. Very clever work there from Linda, because you can imagine that she would be a little bit annoyed. You would be very annoyed. Why should it be Linda's turn every single time just because the lads go down to the pub? Sister Bobby.
Well, we don't condone violence, do we? Well,
it's not. It's just a little, you know.
A little bang.
She didn't lay a finger on him.
Linda, this is really easy, and it's really quick for me, because, Dominic, you're lucky. You'd have been divorced by Knutsford, to be honest. You would have got past junction 19. So you're very lucky. Linda's still with you all the way to Huntington, to be honest. It took that long for her to get that cross.
That could be the name of his autobiography, Divorced by Knutsford. Mm.
So, Linda, very easily forgiven.
So the M6, A14, large roundabout. Then the double up is the roundabout near Huntingdon, Wallop.
Yeah.
There you go. That's what you have to do there.
Nuts was only about 10 minutes down the M6, so that says you all about Bobby. And I think, Paul, the thing about it, because he did drive back, and that was good of him, but after a long week, and then he had quite a few sherbets on board, pints of heavy and whiskey chases, I think you were describing them as. They're mine, lime and lager. Is that Linda, I think, absolutely, snoring and all the things that go with it as he sleeps all the way, then absolutely forgiven, and, he was lucky not to get worse whiplash than that.
It's just a little knock against the passenger window.
She didn't touch him.
There.
It was all mechanically aided.
Yeah, what do you think there, Brother Matthew?
Yes, I also think, what is Dominic doing thinking he can go for a drink every Friday night, and that's okay because he drives back on the Sunday? If you give me an option between, are you going to be driving on the Friday night, or are you going to have a drink on a Friday and then drive back on the Sunday, I know which option I'm taking. And I think I speak for the nation when I say I'd rather be doing the Sunday than the Friday.
Yes.
So actually, it's not the same, Dominic. So frankly, you've had it coming, mate. They're bang on the head every time. Well done. Definitely forgiven.
Well, they were this week's confessions. Did you forgive anybody? I suspect you probably didn't, because it's one of those sort of weeks. Anyway, if you have a confession, if that has sparked a thought in your soul, send it in, please. Confessions@bbc.co.uk. More in a week.